Third player, Lochie O'Brien. Now, he is part of that draft class with Paddy Dow that hasn't really hit the heights that we all thought it would. But towards the end of last year, O'Brien did show something, and he really showed when he's on, he could be on, can't he?
Yeah, I agree completely. That's Lochie O'Brien in a nutshell, isn't it? When he's on, he's on. But when he's off, he's off. I mean, he's got that piercing kick where he can break lines and reliably kick down the wing to a mark. And that's what we need. That's what every team needs. You've seen all of the successful teams winning premierships. They've got those midfielders who are reliable kicks. And that's what Lochie O'Brien is. He's not going to be that grunt player that's going to get 5-6 tackles a game. He's not going to be that handballing player in and out of traffic. He's going to be that outside hand pass from Cripps, kicking it to a player down the forward line. And if he can get some continuity in his game, which is something we've spoken about a lot of players in this series. I mean, consistency is the number one thing to success. Everyone knows it in any industry. It builds belief, it builds confidence. And I feel like that's something that the people from that draft class have lacked for the last 3-4 years. That consistency, that confidence in their own abilities. And once he gets that, he could really be anything, Lochie. So it's a massive year for him.
Yeah. He's a little bit of a luxury player. And I know we speak a lot about like Jack Martin being this like, you kind of have to sacrifice a little bit because like to get the most out of him. I feel like O'Brien's similar, but he's just like we said, when he's on, and he's probably one of the very few players that I can like count on to hit Mackay on the chest from outside 50 and just like pierce it into him. And with Curnow back, the more options that he's given and like the little bit more freedom, I think what he struggled with was too much responsibility. And that's a tight line to cross because you do need to be accountable as a player. But he was asked to do too much because of how poor we were defensively and the lack of pressure in our midfield. If we can start to dominate the contested ball, really dominate like the inside and the tackling aspect of the game, you see the likes of like Ed Langdon from Melbourne, how much freer they are when their midfield is on. If O'Brien, because O'Brien's probably the most natural wingman on the team.
Yeah.
So if he's given that freedom to just do his role as like kicking to Mackay and kicking to Curnow as well, that could be the catalyst for a big, big change in his performance this year.
Yeah, you've said it like correctly entirely. He's that cherry on top that every team needs. That little bit of finesse that you need to string a nice play together. I mean, we've got the grunt players now. You just said it perfectly. We've got those grunt players. We need to apply that pressure. And once it gets out of there, we need players like him to be hitting targets and just being that cherry on top. And that's his role to a T. And that's something that he hasn't been able to hit. We see him make these amazing kicks time and time again, but then we see him, how many times have we seen him on the ball mess up a kick to a forward player or just look like he's completely unconfident on the ball, like he's a deer in headlights. And then you see him in the VFL when he's got no pressure and he lights it up every week. And then you're like, why isn't he playing? But it's because when he does get to the AFL, like the likes of Paddy Dow, he doesn't recreate the same type of finesse that he's got in those games because of the pressure, the lights. And that's because of the inconsistency. Once he builds consistency and that confidence, that game that we speak about, he's on. He'll be on for a very long time. But again, it's a massive year for him because he hasn't had that yet. He has not stringed together a successful season in his entire career as to date. So hopefully, I hope he's working hard in the preseason. I hope that he builds that confidence in his body because really he could be the perfect player we need.
Yeah, and I think we saw a snippet of his potential against St Kilda last year where he was electrifying in some of the things he was able to do. And he almost seems, I think the best word is like a languid, where he doesn't seem like he's trying, but he just like hits kicks. Like he's just brilliant on the ball. And he just does it in this like very fluid and just almost like it's like second nature to it. And I find him in a situation very similar to Paddy Dow at the start of last season, where Dow obviously had enough impact in the games that he played, especially towards the back end of the season, where we're now pretty confident about what he can be because we've seen it for at least like a little bit of time, right? With O'Brien, I think it would be harsh to say like he needs to explode and be like one of our best midfielders because he hasn't had anything close to the amount of game time needed, because it doesn't happen overnight. You need to build up to that. And he already had that head start last season. So I it's harsh to say, but I think it's his last chance. I think this year's his last chance, purely because we've seen what he can do. So we've seen the potential. Now it's his time to actually execute it for a prolonged period of time. That's
Yeah.
something that he needs to carry with him and needs to almost use it as motivation, I think.
Yeah, something that I'll point out that you said perfectly was the way that when he looks like he's not trying, when he just lays back on his kicks and he hits them perfectly.
Yeah.
You hear sports stars talk about it in every sport that's played on the earth. They say when we're playing our best, it's when we play on instinct, when we're not thinking, when we're not in our heads.
Yeah.
When you're just playing to your strengths and you're not thinking and you hit the first pass that you see and you're not constantly overthinking situations, that's when you're at your best. And I feel like that's what he's a victim to. I feel like he's a victim of overthinking, of the pressurized situations getting to his head, and he just doesn't perform. But I agree with you completely. This is his last season to prove to us what he's got. He's got to show something. I mean, we've seen it in little glimpses, but we would much rather a little less than that consistently than really low lows and really high highs. I'd rather see him flat out just be a consistent 17 to 20 possession player a game than being 10 possessions a game and then getting 25.
Yeah.
I mean, we need some consistency in him and before he keeps his spot in the team.
Yeah, because not everyone has to be a star. Like the teams need role players, and I think he's the perfect role player because he just provides that. Like, he won't make the headlines. He's not like a Walsh or like a Chera or a Williams where he'll have 35 touches, kick 2 goals, and break a game apart. He won't do that, which is fine because not everyone has to, and not everyone can, because a side full of stars is only as like it's not going to be good. Like if you have 22 Zach Williams, one game you might win by 150 points, but the other game when they're not on, it turns to shit, right? So if he can become that reliable, like you said, 16 to 22 touches a game with like good, I think what he's good at, he needs to really just pronounce it. Like his kicking efficiency, his disposal, like his like ball gathering, like how many touches he can get. I think it also comes down to coaching. I think Teague left him out to dry a little bit in terms of the way of like his tactics. And Voss, I think, is smart enough to realize the ability that he has and coach towards getting the best out of him whilst also mitigating his weaknesses.
Yeah. You've hit it precisely. That's exactly. I agree with everything you just said. He's got to be that consistent player. He's not going to be the big headline player that we need, but that's not his role in the team. Everyone's got a role to play. We've got tacklers, we've got ball getters, and then we've got him, which is that cherry on top, that finesse, that final kick in the chain where he's hitting Charlie or Harry on the chest, and we're kicking goals. That's where his future lies. And if he can do that game in, game out, we'll love him. But if not, could be his last year for the Blues.
Yeah, it could be. There are our thoughts. Let us know your thoughts on Lochie O'Brien's 2022 in the comments below.